You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
WCYTV
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. We have quite a lot to dig into, so without further ado, the Department of Homeland Security still remains under partial shutdown, and that has never been more relevant to the news that we are facing, given the growing Islamic terror threats that are consistently popping up. Although I shouldn't say popping up, because these are in no way, shape, or form random in not just the United States, but throughout the Western Hemisphere. And it's not just about the Travel Security Administration lines at the airport. Believe it or not, sometimes it's quite nice to have the TSA agent walking throughout the corridors of the airport with the dog, a little extra security that is armed nearby, a few extra pairs of eyes on the screens to make sure that everyone is getting scanned, while members of Congress get to just breeze right through those security lines. Americans are dealing with that inconvenience, but it's not about the inconvenience. It is about the consistent level of threats, which are not being addressed to the full power of the federal government. Why? Because still, the Democrats have maintained that the Department of Homeland Security should be shut down because they don't like ICE. Now, there's a little bit more on this, but I want Speaker Mike Johnson, who brought this up today. He has kind of an outline. He kind of gives it over as far as to the American people. And I want you to hear his argument on it.
Now, look, the Democrats' record is as dangerous as it is shameful. And we would be remiss if we did not address the shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security right now. Over the weekend, 2 aspiring terrorists, as you've seen, threw homemade bombs into a crowd of protesters in New York City. I won't even comment on how badly the media has misled the American people with coverage of that story, but let's talk about the reality. The more important point is that 2 terrorists nearly killed dozens of people with bombs, and the agency of the government that is specifically tasked with defending our homeland from exactly those types of threats is currently shut down, thanks to Democrats in Congress. Those bombs never exploded, thanks be to God, and countless lives were spared. But one of the attackers allegedly told police after the attack that he hoped that it would, quote, be even bigger than the Boston Marathon bombing. There was an alleged attack, a terror attack in Austin, as you know, 2 weekends ago. A bomb threat at an airport in Kansas City on Sunday. And the Department of Homeland Security is warning that the U.S. is susceptible to lone wolf and sleeper cell terror attacks on our homeland. And again, I'll repeat, all the critical agencies like CISA, the agencies that monitor bio threats and attacks on our critical infrastructure like CBP and the Coast Guard, they're all shut down right now because Democrats, as usual, are playing games. They're playing games with people's lives. We got other critical agencies like FEMA and TSA that are unfunded, experiencing significant staff shortages, and that's why travelers around the country have felt already the unfortunate effects. This weekend, airports reporting record wait times. All of that is because of the Democrat shutdown. If you missed a wedding or a funeral.
All right, so he goes on this particular line. I'm going to level with you. I have a lot of respect for Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. This is not the thing to say here. There are 2 active terror threats. Those IEDs, which we have new information on regarding a Pennsylvania storage unit, in which there are reportedly more of these high fragmentation IEDs, improvised explosive devices with all kinds of essentially chunks of metal and glass that were rigged around a far overpacked explosive, which, by the way, appears to be why it didn't go off. He just put too much of the explosive in so that it didn't actually have enough expansion room to oxidize, just kind of smoked and fizzled out. It wasn't packed correctly. And that's the only reason that dozens of people are not dead. The man who shouted Allahu Akbar, the 2 of those boys from Pennsylvania. Now, if I'm not the Speaker of the House. I know that you have to maintain a certain sense of decorum, but my God, if you do not have the outrage over actual terror attacks that are going on right now, the Department of Homeland Security, which is shut down, and instead we're talking about TSA and travel times, I'm going to level with you. I think at this point there should be some direct calling out of the names and the national campaign of these are the people that do not give a flying damn if you are ripped into shrapnel and shreds in major cities because of Islamic terror attacks, which are not stopping and which are not slowing down, because this is the last gasp of the radical Islamic regime that has not yet been imported to Western Europe. Now, this also hinges on Senate Majority Leader John Thune. We're going to get to him in a little bit. But first, we need to bring you information on the shooting, which occurred at the U.S. Consulate in Canada. So this being in Toronto this morning. This is the original, I believe, or at least right off the top of the bat here. This would be the officer who gave kind of an initial press conference and begged anyone for any information because, you know, heaven forbid they actually have cameras on things in Canada that, you know, aren't people exercising free speech.
Breaking news, Canadian police reporting that the U.S. consulate in Toronto has been hit by gunfire. That's all the detail we have. Let's watch live.
I would also like to ask that any members of the public who may have some evidence, some dash cam footage, some video footage, anything that might be suspicious activity that could be connected to this, that they please contact the police to assist us with our investigation.
Thank you. Very helpful. Excellent. Thank you very much to the Canadian police forces. So in what we do know, not from, you know, the Inspector General Sherlock Holmes over there, the two men who showed up outside the consulate drove in a vehicle, so there should also be traffic camera footage of this, fired several rounds, putting bullet holes in the glass. There are at least 5 confirmed shots. There might be several more. Again, bizarre that that's not even publicly stated so far. Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, made the case that, yeah, I mean, there are Islamic terror cells that are in operation across the United States and in Canada.
Have you got any indication from police that these shootings at the synagogues and this shooting at the consulate are related in any way, the same people involved?
Yeah, no, we haven't had any information on that. But again, this is just me speaking. I believe there's sleeper cells all over the world, as we know. They're in the U.S., they're in Canada here. And we have to weed these people out and hold them accountable. Because, again, folks, we all grew up here.
So I love this. No, first of all, we did not all grow up here. We did not know. You imported a lot of migrants. We in the United States imported a lot of migrants from a culture that is completely incompatible with our own. And if you ever say that, oh, they get very, very, very angry. How dare you make it quite clear that the group who is willing to throw bombs at you if you criticize their culture, that group might not be compatible. He says, well, we got to weed them out. We got to find out. Okay, well, that's great. But you were letting them all in and arresting anyone in Canada who spoke out against these particular groups. So, I mean, I'm not really buying it over here because here at the United States, I mean, in the city that was supposed to never forget the horrible Islamic terror attack of 2001, now Zoran Mamdani is just openly gaslighting the entire city in the United States, enjoying fine meals right after an Islamic terror attack with Mahmoud Khalil, the non-American student from Columbia University, with final removal orders, which of course a judge halted for absolutely no reason, even though the State Department enjoys constitutional preeminence over visas in the United States. And this particular individual that Mamdani is sitting down to enjoy a meal with all of the cameras rolling, was preaching for a fighting of the total eradication of Western civilization. For those on the live stream, here's the photo of this particular meal. Now, again, I really do enjoy the fact that Mamdani will come out if you point out that his wife also liked Instagram posts and reposted Instagram posts about women being raped. Not, it's terrible women are raped, but praising the Hamas fighters, the Iranian-backed fighters on October the 7th for sexually molesting women. Well, he says you can't criticize his wife because she's not a public, figure, but of course she's in all of these various photos. And Mahmoud Khalil, who he's sitting with, who posted not too long ago, "We are Westerners fighting for the total eradication of Western civilization. We stand in full solidarity with every movement for liberation in the global South. Our intifada is an internationalist one, Islamic and Marxist. Our intifada, our global fight, is an internationalist one. The international, that would be the socialist dog whistle. We seek community and instruction from militants in the global South." Not exactly hiding the ball there. Unfortunately, this is the lower end of the updates on this particular terror attack in New York City. Radio crew, we have to send you to the commercial. We're going to continue over on the live stream. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Now, the Federal Bureau of Investigation announced today that they had raided a storage unit in Pennsylvania of the two terrorists in New York City. There was also earlier today an additional bomb threat outside of Gracie Mansion in New York City.
Ibrahim Qayyumi and Emir Balat brought 2 homemade explosives to an anti-Muslim protest on Saturday. Thankfully, neither detonated, but as you mentioned, more homemade bombs have been found and safely removed from a Pennsylvania storage unit connected to the case. Both suspects are being held without bail after their first appearances in court yesterday on charges that include attempting to provide material support to a foreign terrorist organization and using a weapon of mass destruction. According to a criminal complaint, both men expressed support for ISIS, and one talked about watching ISIS videos.
Younger and younger individuals who are radicalizing and mobilizing to violence. And this is taking place against the backdrop of social media, the dynamics of online culture. It's not limited to ISIS, it's across the ideological spectrum.
Fox News Digital captured these photos of the suspects' homes, both located in Philadelphia suburbs, roughly 15 minutes apart. The suspects are U.S. citizens, but their parents are naturalized U.S. citizens from the Middle East. An attorney for one of the suspects tried to suggest yesterday that the two co-defendants were strangers to each other.
Oh, I love the instant runaround desperation to try to make this appear as just some chance, happenstance kind of thing. We'll talk about that regarding CNN with Stephen Kent in just a little bit. Before we get to that, though, I do want to discuss something that's really frustrating in this entire story. So right now, what you're hearing, again, what the FBI linked today in several raids, was that the Pennsylvania homes of the individuals where they grew up were raided. Additionally, the individuals who were raided had a storage unit that other IEDs were found inside. Again, that's inside Pennsylvania. And that's a bit of an issue for me when I look at this particular story, because Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania has painted himself as some very competent administrator who's going after all of the crooks, and he's out there looking at everybody. He's doing all of this really important work, and he has such great leadership qualities here. And yet he has soft-handed, again, refusing to point out that the firebombing of his own governor's mansion in Pennsylvania was attacked by Islamic radicals. He wouldn't go after the Islamic terror threat when his own house was caught on fire. Now, again, here, another of his excellent administrative slips, allowing these two individuals to cross into New York City. But again, this is also the state where we see CDL after CDL, commercial driver's license after commercial driver's license, given to individuals who are not citizens of the United States, who can't read or speak English, and are then released out onto the roads to commit vehicular manslaughter. So Pennsylvania is just a blue haven for homicide. It's disgusting, it's despicable. But where is the name calling out, pointing out these policies give these kinds of consequences? Because again, when the shoe is on the other foot, the names are called out immediately. Now, on to some of the other news elements here, because we're going to get to some of the fraud situation. Tim Walz is currently running around suggesting that the Minnesota fraud investigations at the state level are really great because they're making a lot of arrests. And then, of course, kind of the panacea the left is bringing forward for the next election. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about some of this Iranian mine-laying, the breaking news out of the Middle East. We're going to bring the radio crew back from commercial. We got a lot to talk about tonight. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. Iran has begun laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz. This is a pretty big update. Let me explain why. The reason it matters that Iran has started laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz, it's a last-ditch desperation attempt. First of all, they only have about 2,000 to 6,000 naval mines in their inventory. And it's not enough to just, drop a couple of party favors, say, "Hey, Sham," and hit the road. That's not what they're doing. Because the Iranians couldn't effectively close the Strait of Hormuz with their navy, which is now at the, bottom of the sea, because they have no navy anymore, they have been relegated to getting a couple of the old Venezuelan-style fishing boats and shoving mines off of the backs of them into the Strait of Hormuz in a desperate attempt to blow up any shipping, or if they really cross their fingers, U.S. naval craft in the Strait. It's a very, very bizarre move because if you know anything about mines at all, they often do not stay where they were dropped or moored to, especially not the kind of mines that Iran is using. Essentially, we know we're never going to have control of the Strait of Hormuz again, so we're going to try to wreck it as much as possible. Very, very North Korean approach to the DMZ, for example. Now, the United States intelligence assets, which according to CBS, began to see indications of Iran deploying some of those mines, many of those of Iranian but also Chinese and Russian origin, into these shipping lanes, occurred yesterday at about 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And since then, the United States released a response through President Trump. Trump got out there and said, "If Iran has put out any mines in the Hormuz Strait, and we have no reports of them doing so yet, we want them removed immediately. If for any reason mines were placed and they're not removed forthwith, the military consequences to Iran will be at a level never seen before." Correct, because again, he said if you mess with the Strait of Hormuz, then you are going to suffer a pretty serious consequence here. Now, that can come in a couple of different ways. That can come in the way of the United States essentially leveling any IRGC suspected compound near the Strait of Hormuz, putting up a couple of drones on permanent loiter, or just suggesting that, perhaps another Middle Eastern power is going to temporarily gain additional soil on the coastline of the Strait of Hormuz, and then the United States administrates a base there. Now, that would drop oil prices through the floor. We don't have any indications yet of what is happening. Now, CENTCOM has released footage now of these particular I can't really call them like strong naval craft, essentially pontoons, the Turban Redneck Brigade, the Khafia Khalawam has now taken to the Strait of Hormuz and found out that the same United States military who enjoys blowing up speedboats from the cartels in the Western Hemisphere really enjoys blowing up mine-laying speedboats in the Eastern Hemisphere. Here's what some of that looked like. So nice, lovely targeted strikes. You can see the after explosions are mines, which are popping off one after another. There appeared to be some type of rocket-propelled grenade on the back of that boat as well, which shot off the RPG into the distance. I find that funny. So here's a little powwow. I'm trying to explain this. Imagine two lovers. Imagine instead of the two people in like the weird bathtub commercial where the couple's like holding hands in the bathtub, it's two speedboats, two Iranian speedboats. And they're whispering sweet nothings about mine laying. And then, boom. Then fireworks. Fantastic. CENTCOM again, doing the Lord's work here. Now, that little flashing little symbol that some of you on the live stream saw right before the strike occurred, there was somebody who was dumb enough to actually have his phone out and was recording the drone that removed him. That's what that often looks like. You are essentially seeing some of the imaging equipment on the cell phone, which is doing a little flash to do some range finding and things for the focus. That's a beacon for the old MQ-9. So the president then announced, "I'm pleased to report that within the last few hours, we have hit and completely destroyed 10 inactive mine-laying boats and/or ships, with more to follow." And then Hegseth followed out and said, "At the direction of President Trump, CENTCOM has begun eliminating inactive mine-laying vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, wiping them out with ruthless precision. We will not allow terrorists to hold the Strait of Hormuz hostage." And this brings us to some of the drama, because there are a couple of media reports from the Washington Post, that has then been taken and strung into the wind, and then an Axios report, which are causing people a lot of dyspepsia. So the Washington Post reports from two U.S. Defense, or I should say War Department officials, that the United States is moving some of its THAAD atmospheric defense batteries from South Korea to the Middle East. Now, these two officials, which have suggested this based on one photo where there is one THAAD battery which is being taken apart in South Korea, they're saying this is evidence the United States is abandoning Korea. And Kim Jong-un immediately went out and did a ballistic weapons test, which is funny. It was a really awful test, apparently. Not even the second stage rockets engaged. North Korea is supposed to be way further ahead than that. I don't think anyone actually told the North Koreans. But the South Koreans immediately started panicking after this Washington Post article was taken and amplified. I'm going to let you in on something that normally I don't do, from kind of the inside source thing here. Several of these THAAD batteries are set to be replaced anyway, because some of our most advanced THAAD batteries are sent, or excuse me, some of our first THAAD batteries, I should say, were sent to South Korea and are stationed there. It's where one of the regular maintenance crews that works on that type of anti-air and missile intercept technology, that's where they go to do their service. South Korea. So I'm going to let you in on a little secret. There are already replacement THAADs that are being moved over into position. Some of those particular batteries, which are being removed, aren't even going to the Middle East at all. They're being rotated out for service, maintenance, and refitting. Because again, they're some of the earlier THAAD batteries. Now, did the Washington Post do any of that checking? Absolutely not. They just said, hey, look, here's a photo. They're taking it down. We're all running away from Korea. Journalistic malpractice, absolutely. Meanwhile, Axios. Axios has written an article in which they are claiming that the Trump White House, this is how the headline is framed, scoop, White House tells House Republicans to stop talking about mass deportations. So first of all, headline malpractice, that's not even the article. The actual article from Doral, Florida, where there's a messaging conference going into the midterms. So they're saying, hey, here's what you all should say so that you're not saying things that then the press secretaries have to say, well, no, maybe this is true in Tennessee, but not in New York, because you have different kinds of Republicans. They said, White House Deputy Chief of Staff James Blair privately urged House Republicans on Tuesday to stop emphasizing, quote, mass deportations, end quote, and instead focus their messaging on removing violent criminals, according to sources in the closed-door briefing. Okay, this got a lot of people really angry, and a lot of, Republicans fell for it again, Trump's backing away from this. Guys, there are several deputy chiefs of staff in the White House, and they do, in fact, say different things. I also would like to caution you, whenever you have an article where the only quote is the word mass deportations, that it's just as likely that James Blair stepped forward here and said, hey, if you have 5 things to focus on, this is the order that you should focus on them, and maybe mass deportation shouldn't be your first line, but really your 4th or your 5th line. That's a totally different article, but do you actually see Axios getting into the details or offering benefit of the doubt? Absolutely not. Absolutely not at all. The rest of the article, by the way, is a why it matters, a state of play, the big picture, and a what's next. Absolutely nothing about the source, just, oh, hey, we got a scoop. Maybe someone in the White House said something. Yeah, that's exciting. Real special. So, again, thrilling things that we are seeing from this particular Axios crew. We're going to send the radio crew over to commercial. We're going to dive into a few more interesting fraud stories over on the live stream. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. All right. Meanwhile, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is doing a victory lap for himself amid several federal investigations. Again, from a multiplicity of federal agencies. Why? He's doing a little victory lap for himself because while people are continually on his own party in Minnesota calling him a fraudulent governor who has aided and abetted fraud, he said, well, actually, the reason that you're hearing about a lot of fraud in Minnesota is not because there's billions and billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars in fraud in like every single state or grant-related industry in Minnesota. It's actually because, well, we're arresting people. And because we're arresting people, that's why you're hearing about it. A bold move. Here's Tim Walz.
I think Minnesotans have to recognize is You're hearing about fraud in Minnesota because we are prosecuting people. You're going to hear about it in other states. You're going to continue to see it. But the fix is you don't want to hear about fraud not because somebody's not prosecuting somebody. You don't want to hear about fraud because you know the safeguards and the systems are in place. And I don't see there's not another model. No other state has gone to a more decentralized model. Every other state has moved towards a more centralized model of accountability, and I think that's what makes most sense.
Oh, you see, it's not that he did anything wrong. See, no, actually, he did everything right, and it is, but it is. If you can follow this, I really do not know how this man actually gets up every single day and makes these kinds of cases. Now, on the Senate side, what are Democrats actually out there attempting to do at the moment? We're going to cover that in just a little bit. There is something a little gross that I do have to share with you before we go over to the John Thune and the Save America Act stuff. This would be regarding, I know, the ladies of The View. Because we've been talking about all of the terror attacks that have been consistent. And when I tell you that there is a permission structure that is created for individuals over on the left side of the aisle to encourage more terror attacks, not just in their, omission of certain words in their coverage, but just outright calling for open violence. We're not joking. So this clip from The View today, sent over to us by Nick Fondacaro. Again, The View is half of the Democrats' voting demographic. Middle-aged women over on the left. So when they say things like that, you need to keep in mind, when the DHA says shut down, they don't care. It's a feature for them, not a bug.
Oh, God.
Did he just say it's both?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
He speak with forked tongue.
Like Snake. Does it seem like we're going to be getting... So what does this tell you? This is mixed messages, and we're used to that, but what is your gut feel?
I feel like we're living in the reign of terror. Am I the only one here to remember the French Revolution?
Oh, my. Oh, my, oh, my. Oh, my, are we endorsing the guillotine? Oh, my.
I really feel like every day I wake up and he has created more chaos, more misery around the world. The economy is going down the toilet. Gas prices are going through the roof. World economies are suffering. And we're in the middle of this. And I feel like we're pretty much helpless to do anything because the Republican Party will not stand up to this fall. That's all.
There you go. Do you catch it? Do you catch it? Well, the real problem is it's Republicans. Somebody needs to do something. Somebody do something. And it turns out that the somebody do something means throwing a firebomb, means throwing an honest-to-God IED, means committing a shooting, means getting out there and participating in acts of violence. Now, this does bring us over to the Senate. We're going to bring Rob Bluey in from the Daily Signal. Don't go anywhere. Big show tonight. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast with special guest Rob Bluey.
You heard the music. No one better to give us a couple of updates from Capitol Hill and the embarrassment and disappointment that it often is than a guy who's neither of those things, Rob Bluey, president of the Daily Signal. How's it going, Rob?
Hey, Tony, it's good to see you. Yeah, Republicans decided to decamp to Florida this week for their messaging conference to figure out what exactly they should be talking about and focusing on for the rest of this year ahead of the midterm elections. So it's been a quiet few days here on Capitol Hill.
Now, I would guess that one of the things, based on every available poll that Americans might really want to focus on, is the Save America Act. And still, we seem to be getting some heel dragging from Senate Majority Leader Thune. Right off the top of the bat, can you give us an outline of what his latest idea is? I know there's been some kind of cross complaints from his office that maybe this is all a paid influencer op. Help us out here.
Yes, I'm sure that Senator Mike Lee and Congressman Chip Roy are paid influencers. The Save America Act, as you indicated, is incredibly popular, not only with Republicans and independents, but also, it seems, a majority of Democrats. What the Save America Act would do, it would require proof of citizenship when an individual goes to register to vote. It would also require a voter ID for federal elections. These are common common sense things usually have the support of upwards of 70 to 80% of Americans across the board. And like you indicated, it's been a point of contention among Senate Republican leadership. The bill has already passed the U.S. House of Representatives, and you have people like Senator Mike Lee, who's the bill's sponsor in the Senate, asking Senator John Thune to simply force the Democrats into a position where they have to filibuster the bill if they're not going to let it proceed to a vote. And so far, it seems that the Senate GOP leadership is unwilling to go along with that request.
So let's dive into some of the solutions here. Of course, we've talked about the talking filibuster. Of course, we had on Jim Banks yesterday, who wants to toss the filibuster out altogether since it's going to end once the Democrats are in control anyway. So what do we actually see as an opportunity here, or are we just going to be in deadlock forever in the reality here? Not just what we would like to see happen, but given how Capitol Hill works right now, is there any ideas to where this might lean or where we might see this go?
Well, if you listen to John Thune, what he says, Tony, is that we have to get the Department of Homeland Security funding bill done before we do anything else. Now, some Republicans point out that they pivoted to housing and other issues, so that doesn't necessarily hold true when it comes to the Save America Act.
We've seen this song and dance before.
Right,
kind of
exactly. Now, I certainly am sympathetic to getting the funding bill done. I mean, as you and I have talked about before, anything that holds up the ability of the Trump administration to carry out its actions when it comes to any government agency, that is a problem. And so, yes, they need to keep the pressure on the Democrats from that standpoint as well. But I think what you continue to hear more and more from the grassroots conservative Americans is that the Save America Act is one of the single most important pieces of legislation that could be accomplished in this particular Congress. And why is it that Republican leadership, when you have people like Senator Jim Banks, Senator Ron Johnson, both of whom have appeared on your show and outlined the concerns about the filibuster, it seems like we need to be in a position where the Senate Republican leadership is taking this up and seriously forcing the Democrats to stand on the floor and argue against an issue that has 80% support.
Well, I've heard some of the senior leadership officials, at least, also when you look in over to some of their staffers, the kind of the comms crew, have suggested, well, we don't want to start changing the rules or maybe using some kind of extemporaneous loopholes here, there in the ether in order to accomplish things. Yet from those same offices, I'm hearing, well, why don't we just shove it through a reconciliation package? We'll reconciliate it again because that'll totally fly under the parliamentarian.
Well, this comes back to where we started the conversation. So House Republicans went to Florida this week because they wanted to get some consensus around whether or not to do a reconciliation bill. Speaker Mike Johnson would like to use the opportunity to pass some other agenda items on President Trump's wish list. And you do have some Republicans who are suggesting now that they insert the Save America Act into a reconciliation bill because, as you and your audience know, that requires a simple majority in the U.S. Senate. You don't have to get the 60 votes that you would for other legislation. But, Tony, here's the problem. You have to get all of these component parts of a reconciliation bill past the Senate parliamentarian.
Right.
And there is a concern that parliamentarian, as she has done in the past, will throw it out and say the SAVE Act is not germane to this particular bill because it's not a budgetary item.
So if we're kind of in this awkward gridlock right now, what can Congress members actually be doing other than, of course, getting the funding back on amid a record number of terror threats and terror attacks? The Department of Homeland Security left unfunded. What is it that the Congress actually thinks that it can accomplish in the meantime? I mean, could we see at least a couple of investigations, maybe some particular hearings on rogue judges that are ignoring the Constitution? Is there anything they can be doing that's worth, the oodles of money we're paying them?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I'd point to our colleague Tyler O'Neill's coverage last week of the Minnesota fraud investigation that Congress was doing. I was pleased to see that they were calling before the committee certain individuals and politicians like Tim Walz and others that are responsible and should be answering to taxpayers on what was going on there. So I'd like to see more of that. I'd say in particular, though, the U.S. Senate needs to continue confirming the president's nominees and judges in particular. If we find ourselves in a situation, and conservatives I'm talking about broadly here, where the Democrats take control of the Senate and if they take control of the House, but the Senate is the one that, of course, has to approve the president's nominees. So that needs to remain at the top of the list. I would also like to see Republican lawmakers be much more aggressive when it comes to calling out some of the tactics that the Democrats are using to block this Homeland Security funding bill. I mean, there are real life consequences that the Department of Homeland Security, after all, is having to shut down as a result of their impediment.
Rob, we don't need to go down to a messaging conference down in Florida to share with our audience how patently, straitjacketly, Jerry Springer holding a chair insane it is. Waffle House at 3 a.m. on a Friday night insane it is. That in the midst of multiple terror attacks, IEDs thrown in New York, shootings in Texas, we have another bomb threat in New York City happening right now. The Department of Homeland Security is shut down. The TSA is not being paid. The one use for the TSA. And nothing. Chuck Schumer's like, well, yeah, sure, we got Kristi Noem fired, but really, I'm just mad. Like, why are you mad? Well, I'm just mad. Oh my God.
And Tony, one more, add FEMA to the list too. I mean, in the case of a natural disaster. Right.
Oh my goodness, the tornadoes that are sweeping across the Midwest, of course, we still have situations we've talked about with representatives on the show back during State of the Union. North Carolina's not put together all the way yet. That's an excellent point.
Yeah, no, it's really something that I think that it needs to be a concentrated message, probably not only coming from Republicans in Congress, but the White House as well. And this is one of those issues that I think maybe gets resolved after Mark Wayne Mullen's confirmation hearings. I don't know, though. It just seems that the Democrats aren't necessarily paying any price. Flip the script here and imagine if Republicans were doing this under a Democrat president, it would be front page news in every major publication, from the New York Times to the Washington Post all the way. It'd probably be the lead story on the nightly news broadcast.
You remember when they didn't get the TSA funding all the way through in the last shutdown, or even at the beginning of the Trump administration? Every single plane incident, every time there was a delay, was blamed on Republicans in Congress. And now it's quite literally radio and TV silence over the entire thing. Yeah, that's a good
point. It is.
Rob Bluey, we're going to get through it somehow. And in the meantime, of course, the work we're doing over at the Daily Signal, good stuff for sure. Thanks for the updates from Capitol Hill.
Thanks, Tony.
All right, radio crew, we're going to send you guys over to the commercial side of things. We have some breaking news about an Islamic terror attack in London over on the live stream. We're going to get into that right away. Catch you guys on the other side of your commercial. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. All right, just so far what we know, there has been an Islamic terror attack in London, not in London, in Birmingham, in the United Kingdom. So what we know so far, a group of pro-Persian protesters, anti-Islamic regime protesters, or chanters holding a kind of rally in Birmingham. And what followed was a group of Muslims attacking the individuals there. We're going to pull over this particular clip here and show you guys what we can see so far from this terror attack in Birmingham.
حمله تروریستی طرفداران جمهوری اسلامی به ایرانیانی که اومدن تو برمنگام تظاهرات کنن نزدیک مرکز تروریستی امام رضا. ببین یه لحظه صورتتو بذار نگاه کن، این یکی از بچه‌هاست حمله کردن به زن و بچه و اینا.
So my Farsi is a little bit rough. In this particular instance, though, what we do know so far, again, you can see the individual who has been beaten. The police are now finally on the scene. So no longer are we just seeing individuals, which are the subject of terror attacks that are government entities, or even those who would be considered on the political right per se, as might be argued by CNN over in New York City. What we have right now are groups of Islamic terrorists from around the world who are assaulting those celebrating the imminent collapse of the Iranian regime. And the reason I make the case it is the imminent collapse of the Iranian regime right now is the new supreme leader, this Mojtaba Khomeini, has still not been seen. Still has not been seen. It's reported he may not even be conscious and aware that he is the supreme leader. Now, of course, his father, Al-Khomeini, wrote in his will, he really didn't want his son to be the next supreme leader of Iran. But regardless, they showed up with, as we reported yesterday, kind of a fathead cutout poster of a photo of Muqtada Khomeini and said, hey, here's your new supreme leader. And they're like, yeah, a poster. Someone get out the Bieber poster next. Subhanallah. I mean, it's a really bizarre situation. And we're going to keep our eye right now on the situation developing over in Birmingham. This follows the IRGC's, that's the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps' Al-Quds Day March in London that was banned by Home Secretary Shabana Mahmoud. That's according to Tausi TV. So those updates will be bringing you as we get a little more information. Right now, the best advice that I can give you is keep your head on a swivel. Also, since it comes to my mind, speaking of keeping your head on a swivel and praying for those who are affected by these kinds of tragedies, those in southern Illinois, or excuse me, those south of Chicago, in Kankakee, Illinois, there is a major tornado which was seen on the ground a couple of minutes ago south of Chicago. If you're in that area, please take cover and do be safe. We're going to bring the radio crew back in. Lots more news to cover tonight. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal.
The Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
So, Senator John Thune, with the Save America Act, is in a rather difficult place. To be fair, he has walked himself into that difficult place, as we talked about with Rob Bluey. Here's why, just to not beat around the bush and get right to it. He has just now come out before the American people and said, I don't have the votes as the Senate majority leader. I don't have the votes to get the talking filibuster through. I don't have it. He's finally come out today and said what a lot of people have speculated for some time. I would say better late than never, but in this case, it's not better late than never at all to make this admission, and I'll explain why in a second.
Run a risk of being on the wrong side of President Trump and your resistance to do this talking filibuster, tying the Senate in knots for weeks.
We don't have the votes either to proceed, get on a talking filibuster.
That would be a 51 vote majority needed.
Nor to sustain one if we got on it. But
Meaning
that is just a function of math. And there isn't anything I can do about that. I mean, I understand.
By the way, when he says maintaining it once they're on, means that if the political pressure got hot enough, then he's not even sure that he could get Republicans together to essentially not vote alongside the Democrats and just knock down the bill. So they would be very soft yeses, if at all, anyway.
The president's got a passion to see this issue addressed, as we all do.
Does he understand that, though?
Well, we've conveyed that to him, but we will continue to make that argument because I think it's important that everybody understand that this really is about the votes, it's about the math.
Okay, let's talk about that. If you would have said that at the very beginning, you would have been fine. You would have been fine. You would have said out, look, we don't have the votes. Then what would people have asked you? Well, who do you have? Who do you have? Get out, start collecting the cards there, man. You tell us who is a yes. I'm going to let you guys in on a secret. There's no law that says you have to keep your vote secret until it's time for the vote. Kind of cool, right? Theoretically, you would believe things, and then you would vote for the things you believed in. And I've heard all of these Republican senators, and even one Democrat senator talking about how, hey, I'd be in support of this kind of a thing. So why not get the individuals on record? Go ahead and hold a vote of some kind. Get it out there. See who's going to go on the record and be for it or against it. Because, and here's why I make this point. If Susan Collins, we're in primary season, boys, girls, and squirrels. If the Republicans do not have senators willing to get out there and do things, guess what? Those Republicans, if they are up for any kind of re-election in the Senate, should be replaced in the primary. This isn't difficult. Is John Cornyn willing to toss aside the filibuster? That is of interest to those in the Texas primary runoff. Because if John Cornyn isn't willing to put the Save America Act forward, well then, it kind of makes sense that voters might want the other guy. They might want Attorney General Ken Paxton. Gee, I mean, it's not exactly rocket science, but you waited 2 through it. Well, actually, no, we're going to focus on housing first. Well, actually, we're going to focus on getting the Department of Homeland Security back open. Well, actually, we're going to... No, you and I knew all along this is what it was about. Because now here's the catch. You have people saying, well, you're the majority leader. It's your job to find the votes. You would have had a defense against that particular reply had you come out and said that first. But instead, we did the political, I'm not going to talk about it routine. And now it's laid bare. That's really, really embarrassing as a lack of leadership. And it was completely avoidable. So now he says, well, maybe he'll try to bring it forward. Kind of, sort of, like maybe.
The president keeps adding pieces of policy to this legislation. Would it be better if he just had a straight up or down vote on photo ID or citizenship, for instance?
We certainly want to vote on the issues that came over from the House. The president has since that time added some additional components to his request, which we will figure out a way to get votes on as well. But obviously, I think the core issue with respect to the Save America Act is ensuring that non-citizens aren't voting in American elections, that only citizens are voting in our elections, and that they have to be citizens to register to vote, and they have to be citizens to vote.
Okay, great. Kind of a whole lot of nothing. Maybe we'll kind of bring it up because it's important, but not really. It's frustrating to a lot of individuals because he was just in front of a lot of people saying that it was a big disinformation campaign by a bunch of paid influencers. I'm going to level with you again. I happen to run a social media account called the Ministry of Truth, and I have done some influence campaigns before. Absolutely. I'm very open about the ones that I have done influence campaigns with. Not for big, huge, insane, crazy policy stuff, but on kind of lower level things. I did a little bit of promotion with Polymarket, that kind of a thing, because it's fun to make little quippy headlines about polls from kind of the Disinformation Governance Board satirical banner. No one approached me ever in any way, shape, or form about promoting the Save America Act. No one has done that because it turns out that a lot of conservatives support the conservative bill. Just incredible. I know. I too am quite surprised. So really, really, really stupid, pointless, no reason to dig yourself that hole. But again, I didn't hand him the shovel. He grabbed the shovel willingly. So on that side, on the other side of the aisle, though, Democrats in the Senate, again, the millstone is right there around their neck amid a series of terror attacks that are sweeping from Birmingham, the United Kingdom, over to Ontario, into the United States, 2 Islamic terror attacks in the last couple of weeks. One would think that every Republican was talking about this right now and talking about it as passionately as Democrats after a school shooting, saying and naming individuals and going to rallies and protesting certain things. None of that right now. It's all very weird and quiet. Now, on the other side of the aisle, because this is where we get into the weird discordance, the Democrats are starting to get very boastful about how, the Trump administration's all coming to a collapse and the midterms are going to be super easy. That's also overconfident and stupid. So in case you want a quick summary here, a little TLDR, everyone is really overconfident and arrogant and therefore really stupid for no reason whatsoever. Case in point, Adam Schiff, the pencil-necked man himself from California. Look at this man. You would think that he just won the marathon. He's so excited and proud of himself.
The reckoning is coming, but this can only happen if we stand fast, if we stand together and stand strong.
If we stand, if we reduce, reuse, recycle, I'm doing the wavery, havery voice. If we rise up and spread our wings. And the organs in the background. Dun, 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 dun. I mean, okay, the man's excited.
So what will it be? Are you ready to say to Donald Trump and his MAGA lackeys that we are mad as hell and not going to put up with it anymore, that we have had enough? When Donald Trump and his cronies line their pockets. Well,
little Jeb Bush moment. Are you ready to say we've had enough? No one's cheering. When we say that we... Okay, so they're getting out there. They're running a little early victory lap here. Bad mistake. Because once you actually get in front of people, and including a number of people over on the left, like Bill Maher, for example, who ask really tough questions, all of a sudden, Adam Schiff is struggling just a bit.
This statement from the administration: the president had the constitutional authority to direct the use of military force because he could reasonably determine that such use of force was in the national interest. That's too vague for you?
totally vague.
Okay, because that's from Obama, about Libya.
Well, Obama made the argument initially that he could go into Syria without an authorization.
We're not talking about that. We're talking about Libya.
I and many others pushed back on that argument. Ultimately, he did not go forward with going after Assad, even though Assad was gassing his own people, because he thought he might lose the vote in Congress. But I respect the fact that that was important to him, and the fact that he did not have the support of Congress meant that we weren't going to go forward.
So first of all, Schiff gets out there and immediately starts confusing Syria and Libya. And again, once Mars says, oh, you're a fan of that statement when the president in office is different, then he's got nowhere to go. We saw this in the foreign policy situation in Munich, the Munich Security Conference. AOC had no idea what she was doing. Gretchen Whitmer had no idea what she was doing. Gavin Newsom right now has no idea what he is doing on the foreign policy front. They're just mad. The left can't adopt the libertarian grumping point that the right can sometimes do in the contrarian. They don't have that in their base. They have Bernie Sanders, and then they have everyone's a racist. And then whatever they can drudge out of the old Hillary Clinton tagline collection. When you actually get that out in front of Americans, it really shows that Americans just hate everybody. And that's not a recipe of success. That's not a recipe of, yeah, this is fantastic for the midterms. It's a disaster for incumbents. Radio crew, we're going to send you off to the end of night commercial. We're going to continue over on the live stream. Lots more news to cover. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Now, I must inform you that the strategy just really gets worse from here, because when you actually get into the midterms, you get into some of the big breaking news stuff, whether we're talking about the economy, whether we're talking about the price of energy, whether we're talking about the price of housing. Democrats do not know how to actually talk about these things. They will get out there and say, there's problems. There's problems with healthcare. There's problems with ICE. There's problems with affordability. There's problems with the economy. They don't actually have any solutions for those things that appeal to voters. Republicans have two strategies. They can say, hey, we've been good at this before, and you trust us over the Democrats. Now that works like 6 out of 10 times. It's not really good in close elections where Democrats can pretend to be a moderate, aka Winsome Earl Sears, whose entire election was, I'm not Abigail Spanberger. That was her campaign, and it sucked. And it's why Winsome lost. We saw the same thing until way too late. Up in the New Jersey gubernatorial election. A lot of elections, the Republicans have tried that strategy. Well, I'm not the Democrat. Okay, 6 out of 10 times that works, probably not in the midterm. Number two, Republicans' big grand strategy here is to hope and pray that around Q2 of this year, the economy takes off. And I mean takes off in a couple of the ways that we're going to talk about here in a second. And then, coming off the heels of, I'm going to level with you, what is going to be a victory regarding Iran. I know a lot of people who have their heads up the downside of a goose are saying a lot of really silly things right now, but the public opinion is in fact shifting towards the president. The price of oil per barrel is in fact falling. As we get to this, though, you have to look at what the Democrats are going to bring. Because if they don't have the, hey, everything's great and we're fine and we're wonderful and we're doing it, if that's not going to work, the Democrats have one other strategy. And it's what we saw on The View a little bit earlier. They're going to get mad. They're going to scream, we're all going to die. And also, what we need to do is act as unhinged as possible and then pretend we totally didn't do so. So James Carville is an excellent example of this, unfortunately. And he starts out in a way that gets a lot of Democrats just a smidgen, just a little bit of momentum initially. He's going to get out there and he's going to hit you with a lie. And then he's going to sprinkle in a little bit of truth. Here you go.
In August of 2024, The Economist said that the U.S. economy was the envy of the world.
Okay, so he's going to start out with a lie here. He says, in July 2024, Biden's economy, U.S. economy, super duper ultra strong. Survey says, no, not in fact the case. But he's going to follow that up with some things that are a little bit uncomfortable and true.
Amy Dimon said it was the strongest economy he had ever seen.
Not that.
It's turning into a catastrophe, and they keep revising the jobs numbers down. And to tell you the truth, the American people have caught on. His economic numbers are just awful.
Okay, so there you had a little bit of truth, and then you flip around to the lie. So first of all, it is true that administrations, Biden's and Trump's, are continually revising job numbers down. That is an issue. And by the way, what this really points to at this moment in time, are various administrations that are just really, really awful through their labor statistics at pegging specific job numbers initially. Now, it's also true that under the Trump administration, a lot of the jobs lost have been federal jobs because he has cut a lot of federal jobs. It's also true that a lot of the Trump administration's investment into the American economy are long-term investments. Factories are not, in fact, built in a day. However, the uncomfortable truth on the downside there is that Republicans are not able to bring forward the same kind of 2016 era job growth that a lot of people ran on, because the strategy is a little bit different. That is a bit of an issue for Republicans, sort of. If they can actually combat it and actually focus on, again, this particular year, again, the net jobs created thing, when you're mixing private and the public sector together, it's a little, I'd say a little bit disingenuous. But that's the Carville approach. That's the front end. Now, here's where it all falls apart for the left. It all falls apart for the left because they cannot control themselves. Whichever party goes into the midterms and does not immediately follow their mild, let's say, disappointed parent style criticism, whoever doesn't follow it up with crazy likely comes away the winner in both the House and the Senate. I'll remind you, the last couple of midterms, everyone was excitedly sharing all of this nonsense. Oh, everyone's so confident they're going to win. By about Q2, end of Q2, we get around June, and everything had flipped on its head. That's like every midterm election in the last 10 years. So moving forward here, let's actually take a look. I should say last 12 years, midterms wise. Here we go, because he couldn't hold it together. The insanity part kicks in, and guys, this ain't going to get voters out to the polls for you.
Look, you fat Trump, if you listen to this, you listen good, because what I'm getting ready to say is what a lot of people in this country speak for, who I speak for. And I speak for a lot of people. You hear me, you fat asshole? This is what we believe. You're right. I got Trump derangement syndrome. I hate the motherfucker. And you know what? I don't want to get rid of it. I don't want to get better. I want to get worse. I want to hate him more. I pray to God in heaven, God reign the righteous reign of Trump derangement syndrome. Pray for me, Lord. I'm your vessel on this earth. Pray for the people that listen to this. We want more. We want to hate the son of a bitch so much that we can't see straight.
As long as you do the insane, crazy stuff, everything that you say before just becomes moot. Everything. All of it. One of the things that Trump has a pretty good handle on is knowing how to be mad at the right time. So earlier today, I criticized Republicans for not getting mad enough. The Department of Homeland Security situation, really great opportunity politically. We're going to talk kind of the political optics of it. Not doing it. Awkward and not really the best attack strategy so far. And a lot of self-imposed gridlock in the Senate. Not useful. Trump, he's willing to get mad, call out things in a way that doesn't completely humiliate himself. Now, here's the stuff that really, really, really gets hilarious. So James Carville, after he gets done ranting and raving, he wants to hate Trump more, blank this, bleep that, all that. Look at how he follows this up. Again, this is all in like the same 48-hour stretch. James Carville here.
I think Jim is a much better general election candidate than Congressman Crockett would have been.
So he's pointing out that James Tallarico is a far better candidate. That's why he won. That's why he beat Jasmine Crockett. Listen to the argument that he makes as to why he believes that Crockett wasn't as good a candidate as James Tallarico. And we'll tie it all together.
Because? Well, she had said that, kind of made fun of the governor for being in a wheelchair, and she said that Hispanics
called them Hot Wheels.
For Trump, yeah, and they said Hispanics who voted for Trump had a slave mentality. That's probably not the best way to get these people back, wouldn't you?
Oh, it's probably not the best.
Look, you fat Trump, if you listen to this,
So that guy is saying, well, the really sharp, insane, crazy rhetoric. That's probably not the way that you want to go. Again, when you have people that are on national television that are calling for the French Revolution, calling for the guillotine, When you have people that Mamdani is inviting over and saying, hey, yeah, the guy said we're going to destroy Western civilization. I refuse to say the guys who committed the act of Islamic terror shouting Allahu Akbar. I refuse to say anything about that kind of thing. I got to condemn white supremacy and Islamophobia instead. When the entire left is going after Representative Andy Ogles because he said, as Charlie Kirk said, that that cultural Islam is incompatible with Western civilization, which is absolutely true. When that's what the focus is, yeah, you really don't have a leg to stand on. The midterms, to pull a little Charles Barkley wisdom here, it's all about who scores more points. It's all about who gets more people out to the polls. Not every election is like that. Believe it or not, presidential elections, you can run against somebody. You can get out there and say, all right, we're going to run against this particular crew. In the midterms, you have to get people out for your particular candidate. Adam Schiff, Mazie Hirono, and yes, including James Tallarico, your Senate candidates of glory here, not going to resonate. I don't think that's going to play. And the reason is that you can only pretend to be the moderate for so long. You can't just get out there and say, oh, I'm actually a centrist Democrat who believes in moderation. I'm just a good old Christian boy. And then the footage exists of you saying this crazy crap.
Christ is the immigrant deported without due process.
No, not even remotely a little bit. Was Christ an immigrant? First of all, Christ and his parents, legal residents of the Roman Empire. Legal residents. They fled a personal and specific, not a policy-wide deportation. They fled a specific attack, went down into Egypt, and then came back into their specific region. They were still in Roman territory control. Not illegal immigrants, not immigrants at all. No, not deported without due process, whatever that means. No, not at all. Blatant lie.
Christ is the senior deprived of their Social Security benefits. Christ is the protester kidnapped in an unmarked vehicle by plainclothes officers.
Okay. Yeah, that's not going to endear the folks to you. It's not going to play. Now, I mean, he's got a lot of weirder clips that are coming out as well. Again, this is their new moderate phrase, their new Beto O'Rourke. Remember, during the Beto campaign, he was going to be maybe the next president. We've heard all of this before. Here you go. This is the really bizarre response to what do you love the most?
Something that you love that's not family or friends.
I love, I'm just saying this because it's on my mind, the trans children who showed up yesterday at the state capitol to advocate for their humanity. They shouldn't have to, but it was an inspiration to watch.
A little weird to get out there and immediately go, what do you love the most other than your family and I love trans children. Bizarre, really bizarre, unnecessary indeed. And then, of course, we get to the last part here, the gaslighting. So this is the core point, because when the left gets out there and makes their big, broad argument, which is that we need to import a bunch of individuals who are culturally incompatible with our own, and then we need to give those individuals voting privileges, and then we need to, and all of the insane upon pile of insane, then they'll get out and they'll do the gaslighting line. This is what they think is really going to work well here. Not seeing it, but here's the gaslighting.
Well, I think it's interesting. I've been in this race for 5 days, and I've had a lot of interviews with national media. No one's ever asked me about the cost of housing. No one's asked me about the cost of prescription drugs. No one's
I wonder why.
Asked me about the cost of childcare. The only thing the media wants to ask me about are trans athletes. And so what I would say is that the only minority destroying this country is the billionaires. Trans people are 1% of the population. Undocumented people are 1% of the population. Muslims are 1% of the population. We are all focused on the wrong 1%.
Ah, yes, the true enemy of trans people, the same billionaires that spent the early 2020s donating to every LGBTQ plus 2IA whatever cause. Remember all of the sponsors of the various pride parades? Yeah, those were billionaires just on the left. Those are the ones that are allowed to exist or whatever. Now, I don't normally engage with just the firm gaslighting style of content, but in this case, I think it's rather useful because, believe it or not, there's not a lot of Republicans who are actually going out with these particular issues and hitting them head on. So first of all, no one's ever asked me about housing. Well, the reason no one's ever asked James Tallarico about housing is because James Tallarico has not put forward a plan to reduce the cost of housing. The Democrats in Congress have not put forward a plan to reduce the cost of housing. From Bernie Sanders all the way over to Cory Booker, to Tim Walz up in Minnesota, at the state level, Gavin Newsom in California, all the way up to the federal level. No plan from the left on reducing the cost of housing. None. Now, Republicans aren't exactly talking about it either. You have a lot of Republicans on the kind of the populist side of the aisle that say, well, the problem is all these corporations. The corporations are the problem. The reason that housing isn't flooding in. The problem with housing, the reason that housing is not surging, that houses are expensive in the United States, can be boiled down to two things. Not huge talking points, to two things. First of all, the supply of homes is not increasing because since 2008, by the data, since 2008, since the housing crisis, we have not seen a ton of new homes being put down in a manner enough to feed the demand. You say, well, but a lot of these suburban homes are going up. In the early aughts, there were oodles, canoodles, and toaster strudels of housing options in the single family home, in kind of the larger suburban single family home, in the starter home construction, as well as apartment buildings that were going up all over the country in small, medium, and major metropolitan areas everywhere. That stopped after the housing crisis and has not really picked up since, but in areas where it has. Specifically, citing Newsweek, May 1st, 2025, in the pandemic buying frenzy, a lot of people said, you know what, California and New York, blue states, Michigan, blue state, Illinois, blue state, these suck. I'm going to move to a place where I can afford a house. And a lot of people started moving to Phoenix, Arizona. And between February 2020 and February 2025, home prices then in Phoenix, Arizona skyrocketed. A lot of demand, not a lot of supply. However, since then, the city's been experiencing a severe price correction because a bunch of the building companies put down a bunch of houses, and now fewer people are moving to Phoenix. The wave has kind of worn off, and so the housing prices are dropping, and dropping rapidly, dropping a lot quicker than a lot of other places around the country. It is a supply issue. Number two, and my personal favorite here, is the interest rates. In 2020, the interest rate was low. In 2019, the interest rate was very, very, very low. And a lot of people ended up getting a particularly low interest rate. I was one of these. We moved into a starter home. And then around the time that we would say, wow, I think it's about time that we built a house or got a bigger house for our family, we looked at our mortgage, we looked at the interest rates, the 2% interest rate that we had, and we go, yeah, I'm not doing that. We're going to stay here where there's not a huge, 6, 7, 8, 9% interest rate. We're going to sit here and we're going to do this for a little while. And that means there is not a large supply of starter homes available for the younger folk to move into. All of the starter homes, there's a low supply, which means the price for those particular starter homes, smaller homes, are a lot higher than you would expect starter homes to be. That's it. Those are the two reasons. The interest rate, a lot of people sitting where they are, kind of a stagnant market because of the way the interest rate, that whiplash from 2% up to 9%, and then kind of coming back down, but not quite all the way, I should say, and then a lack of supply. Now, on the cost of energy going up, same kind of stuff. Republicans aren't talking about it very clearly at all. Very, very frustrating. Very frustrating indeed to watch a lot of people making the case that energy, what are Republicans going to do? What was Congress going to do? Why is energy so expensive? A couple of reasons. Demand is exploding. Not just AI data centers, but also manufacturing centers in general take up a lot of power. United States infrastructure has not been built to this point to handle that much demand. It's an unprecedented strain on the grid. Also, there are still leftovers and holdouts from the government mandates pushing electric vehicles and electric heating on massive new demand. You go back 50 years ago, a very small portion of this country was on kind of central electric air and heat. Now, when you look at the country, you see a vast majority of heating and, of course, obviously air conditioning taking up a huge chunk of electricity. Now, the answer, again, is there's not enough supply. This is where it gets a little bit rough because Democrats say, well, let's just put up a bunch of windmills and solar panels. Well, the problem is that doesn't remotely come close to satisfying the demand for power. You could say, hey, well, let's open up new coal and natural gas plants. Well, there's still a lot of regulations and laws that you have to dig through to get those things built. Or you can say, hey, well, let's put down some nuclear plants, which is the answer, but it's not an answer for the next year. It's an answer for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So I'd say the last part here is that also a lot of utilities operate as government-protected monopolies. You can't really choose your electricity provider in a lot of places, which means there's not a lot of incentive for price to come down. So if your electricity provider says that there are peak hours, and if you use your electricity during peak hours, you're screwed and you're going to pay more, you can't do anything. It's a pseudo-monopoly. Those things are issues that can't just be snap fixed immediately. Now, you can expand the amount of energy supply available. The Trump administration is attempting to do this by unleashing coal and natural gas and oil, refilling the strategic reserve through the Venezuelan acquisitions, as well as a couple of domestic product lines, and likely ending up securing something long-term in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, the stuff that I just outlined is not anything remotely true to the point of what Democrats have been saying in any way, shape, or form, except maybe Ezra Klein kind of on the abundance side, which is getting smaller and smaller and smaller because they'd rather do terrorist stuff, Marxist stuff, and weird racial and gender accusation stuff because, that always works out real well. So Republicans need to come up forward with a particular set of things. Tim Burchett's frustrated because still we are spending money on direct foreign terror and other things that are just sitting in the Senate because Republicans aren't actually bringing things forward to vote on. And we've had Tim Burchett on the show before. Great representative, great guy. I understand completely the frustration that he's feeling on this, and so are a lot of Americans.
When I started, it was $40 million a week. We send $40 million a week, and we literally send them pallets of cash. And they control the 3 banks, and they're going to give you all this rigmarole of, well, it's the NGOs. We have 1,000 NGOs working out of there, and then you add the UN NGOs and other things. They say, well, that's the UN money. That's our money. We fund it. We need to pull our ass out of the United Nations. That's a nightmare. But we got 3 banks over there basically, and the Lord just takes 10% with tithe. These guys are like the mob. Any ingress or egress of cash goes through these banks. The Taliban gets it, and it's all controlled. And these NGOs, the money flows back to this country. I met with Elon Musk. I was sitting across the table, me and you, and he said, Tim, I'm convinced that there's probably members of Congress that their family members or something are getting something off those NGOs.
Now, by the way, you want to know why we're currently not seeing a lot of results on that particular front? I'm going to level with you. Because you got hoodwinked. You got hoodwinked. No, you didn't get hoodwinked by a lot of promises from, you got hoodwinked from a certain kind of promise from those who campaign for office. See, you were told that the real reason there's all of this corruption and money that is very clearly going to, for example, Islamist terrorist groups and things, and NGOs that are funneling mass migration, the reason that your money is going there, the reason that you're not seeing all of this was actually because of the secret band of pedophiles who want Jeffrey Epstein to Israel, the Egypt, and it's all like Erica Kirk, it's a conspiracy. And then, you got to give the Tucker, that kind of nonsense, that kind of retardation. That is what hoodwinked a lot of the American people. And so now, instead of a lot of individuals focusing on these particular bouts of fraud, focusing on this, instead, we're going down the conspiracy nonsense land that is not actually solving any of these mysteries. You have a lot of people arguing about, the Jews and the Zionists and a bunch of nonsense that's not actually doing anything for Americans. Americans do notice this, by the way. They do. They do notice when we're focusing on things. Now, again, Americans understand and agree that the Islamic terror threat needs to be dealt with. They see the terror attacks. But when you then turn on the TV and you see a bunch of the same old grandstanding and gaslighting and, I think we're going to bring up a vote, we're not going to do that. Time's ticking, Republicans. It's ticking. You have until the midterms. Now, I just like you, I deeply hope that at the end of Q2, the tax refunds have everyone really happy. Things start to take off because there's a little bit of stability. We're not messing around with a bunch of instant mashed potatoes style foreign policy on the economic side of things, and things stabilize and we start to see real excellent growth. Things really start to rocket forward and everyone gets a lot happier. I really hope that happens. But hedging that you can screw around right now is a disservice to, for example, the people that are tuning into the show, who elected you to go to Washington, D.C. and to get legislation either through or not. And simply doing the Mitch McConnell line.
Say to my friends on the other side of the aisle, you'll regret this, and you may regret it a lot sooner than you think.
That kind of nonsense where you go, well, I don't want the rules of the order. The rules of the order say that the filibuster. That at some point, either do something or either crap or get off the pot. Cook or get out of the kitchen. Okay. At some point, I get it. The immediate suggestion, by the way, you heard me mention this with Rob Bluey, that we're going to do a reconciliation package to get some of this through. Get out of here with that nonsense. Absolutely not. The individual who decried that particular nonsense to me was Newt Gingrich. Now, the media atmosphere is a totally different thing. But if we actually buckle down as a country, get leaders who are not interested in all of the posturing and the running around and the camera angles and the $220 million ads on, I'm riding a pony, I'm real great, I'm Kristi Noem. If we actually get to, solving some of the issues, where you get Tom Homan instead, who gets up there at 7:30 in the morning and says, this is what we're doing, we're not screwing around. That's the message. That's going to play really well. Again, Marco Rubio doesn't get up there and go, hey, you guys know what's really funny? Everything's really great and hilarious. No, he answers the question directly. Anyone gives him crap, he says, no, screw off. We're accomplishing these specific things directly. And he lists them, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. He gets into Senate committee hearings. He doesn't mess around. He doesn't take off the earrings and get in a big Waffle House at 3 a.m. brawl. No, right to the point, clear to the issue. By the way, this is why Marco Rubio is gaining in the polls as a possible candidate for the 2028 run. He's serious. He doesn't embarrass himself. He gets things done. Americans like that. They're thrilled. Scott Bessent, Tulsi Gabbard, the chief of staff, Susie Wiles. When they do these things, excellent, to the point, good, thrilling. I love it. Americans love it. We're going to have to see some of this from the Senate. We're going to have to see the House. You can't blame Mike Johnson for this one. The man is sending out bills from the House to the Senate as quick as you can order them. What's the Senate there doing? Well, Susan Collins says she doesn't know. Well, Rand Paul's really mad about Iran because Rand Paul, no one's paid attention to him for a while. Well, Mitch McConnell, I'm not sure if he's dead or alive. But, we're puppeting him from place to place like he's Muqtada Khamenei. It's frustrating. It is. It is frustrating. And then over on the right-wing media side, you essentially have two halves. You have a lot of people who kind of really don't know where the momentum is. Where are we pointed? What are we doing? I would feel a little bit in this camp from time to time, where we get in these news cycles where we're just kind of waiting. We're waiting. You get to the showtime and it's all right, what do I have to bring the people who aren't tuning in to politics all day? They're not sitting in this festering bathwater. What am I bringing them? Well, I'm waiting for the Senate to finally get off its hands and do something. Oh, gee, day ending in Y. The other side of the right-wing media, the hyper-populist crazy people, every day are trying to out-insane themselves. Alec Jones is upset because Nick Fuentes said something crazier than him, who's upset because Candace Owens said something crazier than him, who's upset because that little fake Catholic whatever tart who's upset said something crazier than him, who's upset that Megyn Kelly said something crazier than her, who's upset that Tucker Carlson said something crazier than her. And it's just like endless grievance train of nonsense where they're like, well, the reason nothing's getting done is because they're all super secret electromagnetic pedophiles who are chemtrailing the sky purple and we're all going to die from the... Not useful. It's not useful. It's not. The original Nick Shirley investigation, which amplified the fraud in Minnesota, that was useful. The initial kinds of coverage that exposed the COVID-19 manipulation, useful. The reporting from the Oversight Project, which showed that Kristi Noem and her Corey Lewandowski man-whore, Mr. Homewrecker, showed that they weren't releasing immigration numbers to the American people and to the White House. Very useful. The kind of reporting that has exposed consistent fraud and other incidents du jour. Useful. The left isn't going to help you with that. You got to kind of do it yourself. You got to get out there. You got to do the reporting yourself. Now, again, unfortunately, the left is doing the same kinds of things that they always do, specifically in relation to the Islamic terror attacks right here, right now. So while Republicans are tut-tutting each other because, Representative Andy Ogles said that Islamic culture is not compatible with the American people, CNN is just going whole hog into the insanity. And that's what we got a chance to sit down and talk about with Stephen Kent on this media side. Don't go anywhere. Lots more to cover tonight. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Stephen Kent from the Consumer Choice Center knows that you like to consume only the good stuff. And when that comes to media, you don't choose CNN because you don't like the aftertaste. It's really not good for you. Not a lot of effort goes into it in the first place. And boy, howdy, this week do we have examples of what you're not watching. Stephen, have you ever had a week where you just the aroma wafted out of the room like a grody old crock pot?
Well, I would never say that CNN, is the only shop in town. You can get your news in a wide variety of places that you and I both love, but they sure do know how to self-own, especially when it has come to the New York City coverage of these two, I guess we would call them young jihadist who have gotten themselves arrested and likely going away for a long time.
All right, so I do want to pull this tweet up because CNN's coverage of these two jihadi, I can't use the word that you used on FCC air, but
is that a banned word? I learned something new today.
Yeah, everyday good fun. So the actual tweet: 2 Pennsylvania teenagers crossed into New York City Saturday morning for what could have been a normal day enjoying the city during abnormally warm weather. But in less than an hour, their lives would drastically change as the pair would be arrested for throwing homemade bombs during an anti-Muslim protest outside of Mayor Zoran Mamdani's home. Here's what we know so far.
Tony, have you ever walked outside on the first day of spring? It's 75 degrees and you're like, man, I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to feed the squirrels at the park and toss some bread to the ducks. And oh my gosh, there's a grenade in my pocket and it wants me to throw it at civilians. Have you ever just found yourself, caught between two worlds, two desires to go out and enjoy the sunshine or do jihad?
If the weather won't freeze, bring your IEDs. Everyone remembers the old adage. I mean, it's etched into all of our hearts and minds. CNN was so humiliated, so mocked for what has to be one of the most tone-deaf tweets since, CNN sent out a story last week that they announced, quote, a post regarding the 2 individuals arrested for throwing homemade bombs outside of NYC's Mamdani's home failed to reflect the gravity of the incident. Just chucking 2 IEDs full of shrapnel that, thank God, did not go off and kill what could have been upwards of 50, 60 people. They said, anyway, failed to reflect the gravity of the incident, thereby breaching the editorial standards we require for all our reporting. The editorial standards that we're told are all amazing and you should never question. Jake Tapper gets very mad.
What those editorial standards are exactly. I mean, this tweet was funny. It struck me as one of two things. One of three things. It's either AI written slop cutting corners inside CNN to put out a tweet that, basically has no strong opinions about what happened in New York City with this bombing effort, or it was done by an intern who just has no sense of getting the tone correct, or it was maliciously done by a CNN staffer to downplay the bad intent of these 2 teenagers who came to New York City with weaponry to do harm to Americans exercising their First Amendment rights. I mean, it could be one of these 3 things. What I am just left cold by is the idea that they sort of have some sort of editorial standard that says they can't downplay what happened. They made it sound like it was something these 2 guys accidentally stumbled into. Like they, again, went to the city for a day.
As we do.
Then they were provoked by protesters that they didn't like, and lo and behold, they happened to have explosives on their persons and then used them.
So now we talk about
happened?
We talk about this on the cultural side. Obviously, your work over on Geeky Stoics, you've examined, true masculinity and this kind of weird straw man that's built over toxic masculinity and white male fragility. The idea that if you ever criticize a man, apparently men are so fragile, they instantly just start breaking down into tears. Yet you never see any of the think pieces from these lefty organizations about the idea of if you ever criticize an individual on Islam, you ever hold a protest that says, hey, we're not huge fans of Islamic culture, even if that particular protest says some things that are over the line, no one ever discusses how one of the immediate responses, oftentimes, and we have dozens in the United States, dozens of instances of this, is where individuals suddenly get rather violent and shout things like Allahu Akbar and throw IEDs.
Yeah. Well, my first takeaway of these two teens is that they are losers. We've heard a couple of reports now that these kids, the kids' parents, the one with the poofy curly hair who was, photographed throwing the IED device, immigrated here from Turkey and grew up in a home valued at over $100 million in a very nice, more posh area of Pennsylvania.
Right.
And instead of, assimilating into America, embracing the fact that he, like people, who have immigrated here in Congress, who are constant agitators, parts of the squad, he has lived the American dream. Instead, he wants to harm Americans and tear things down. I mean, this is the attitude of losers. It's of weak men and people who cannot make it in our society. And you see this from the radical right to the Marxist left. The person most likely to kill you or do harm to the public has probably got spaghetti for arms, can't lift a dumbbell. Talking about Zoran Mamdani here, of course. It's a common thread, and it's something that's hard to look away from once you see it.
So this brings me to kind of the addressing the elephant in the room in this case, this being that whenever there's some kind of a tragedy like this, whenever there's some type of an attempted terror attack, an attempted homicide, what you have is the public statement which follows, in which you have all of these individuals from the media ecosystem over to the political ecosystem that refuse to say what it was the two dudes were shouting, again, shouting Allahu Akbar as they threw these things, again, pointing up to Allah in their perp walk. They refuse to say these things because they say the true threat here is the Islamophobia. I mean, Norm Macdonald really called it, didn't he?
He did. Yep. Yeah, the real victims of 9/11, every peaceful Muslim in America.
So I got to ask from a cultural perspective here, and not to put you on the spot, seeking solutions, but at a time right now when you have a lot of individuals telling you a problem's not happening, if you do call it out, you're super racist, and the kind of counter example isn't actually to provide something useful, but it is just to be really, really angry. Because that's the counter, right? Just to get out there and scream, well, you're going to ignore this. You're going to say it's all Islamophobia. I'm going to get out there and here's a list of 46 slurs that I know. And it's like, well, hey, that's not particularly useful. What do you actually see as being a couple of the steps forward that we, not just as consumers, but also as those who should be active as citizens in the political ecosystem? How do we start to kind of bring things to a direction that doesn't suck?
Yeah. Tony, you played a clip yesterday that I spliced together from Ben Shapiro on his show on the Daily Wire, where he was talking about the horseshoe left and right, the conspiratorial tone that has overtaken American politics during this sort of populist fever that we've been in for so many years now. And like I just mentioned a couple minutes ago, it is a movement fueled by people who cannot accept the fact that they are losing, that they are not thriving and making the most of their free will and autonomy to shape their lives, take control, and pursue success. They want to.
I don't like things that must be someone else's fault.
Yeah, our politics is being taken over by this on both sides of the spectrum. And so the answer that Ben Shapiro offered, and I'm going to offer it again here, is win. You have to start winning. We have to promote a politics where the goal is to win elections. And when the goal is sometimes to win elections, that actually means in many cases running towards the middle, finding the most popular positions, trying not to build your profile based on being aggrieved and having been defeated, but taking no responsibility for your political positions, wanting the country to win in its foreign conflicts against terrorism, against its enemies. We generally need to be headed in that direction in every angle. We need to pursue anything that takes us closer to winning as a culture and as a country.
I think that's pretty on point. As usual, Stephen Kent, Geeky Stoics, as well as his phenomenal work over at the Consumer Choice Center. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tony.
All right, I'm going to do a little bit of a post 8:30 mail time. So let's call this extra bonus tonus, because a couple of really good questions. Something that I do want to tackle just really quickly here, if you'll give me a brief moment. One of the questions came in asking who I was talking about regarding the Timu Catholic and why. When I was talking about some of these people who, instead of, again, focusing on real things, are instead complaining that everything is a big conspiracy of the Jews or whatever. There was this young lady, I guess, by the name of Carrie Prejean Bowler, and she threw a fit because she was invited to a religious panel, and then again did her whole "the Jews are doing everything" kind of a routine. And ever since then, she's been making her way through the circuit of people who think that, well, you know, being a nutcase means that everyone should have to listen to you too. And the reason that I mocked her in this particular way and called her the Timu Catholic, I really don't have a lot of patience for what are called like cultural Christians. Cultural Christians or cultural Catholics, cultural Protestants, are those who will adopt in a public-facing way certain tenets of Christianity because it gives them street cred, and then will turn around and act nothing like that in their personal life. So on the Protestant side of the Christian aisle here, I despise Joel Osteen. I deeply, truly despise Joel Osteen because he teaches the prosperity gospel, which is where if you just do a lot of good things, the Lord will bless you richly. You give me lots of money and he'll bless you probably. I don't really care for that kind of crap. I also don't care for the kind of cultural Christians who will say, I'm a Christian, and also Jesus was a trans gay abortionist who really wanted you to allow people into your country to, commit acts of violent atrocity. That's kind of cultural Christianity, where you use the name of Christ to smack people in a way that isn't actually spreading the gospel at all or uphold morality at all either. You're just using Christian as kind of street cred. There is a small branch of Catholics who do this as well. And again, I say Catholics because those who convert and then immediately become theological experts and then don't say a lot of things that are in accordance with church doctrine and church history and tradition. Instead, they go against certain elements of the catechism and they go against a lot of the traditional Catholic writings and councils, and then essentially start going off into nutcase land to say a bunch of stuff. That's that kind of Catholic cultural nonsense. An example of a cultural Catholic would be Nick Fuentes, who is a homosexual moron who I knew 10 years ago, who we got rid of because he is an idiot out of the lone conservative, who consistently lied in his reporting and was caught lying and falsifying things in his articles. He is not a real Catholic at all. He uses the Catholic thing to try to impress people. There's nothing Catholic about that. In the same way that there are certain influencers, and Allie Beth Stuckey, who's a friend of mine, who has called this out consistently. The girls who say they want to be trad wife, like Catholic trad wives, which are just essentially fetish thirst traps for dudes who want to look at porn but don't say they look at porn. Those particular individuals, that kind of a thing, the influencer, I'm kind of a hoe, but also I'm going to put the Catholic label on it. That dishonors the name of Christ. So I don't care for cultural Catholics or cultural Protestants. Either actually go in, which is great, because then if you actually go in, you accept Christ as your Savior, and the Holy Spirit transforms your life. There are these cool things called the fruits of the Spirit that you can see displayed out in front of you. So one of the comments said, you mean like Pope Leo? If you think that I am going to comment on if you think I, as an indie fundy Baptist, is going to comment on whether or not I think that the current Pope is doing the right kinds of popey things, I'm not your best guy for that. Now, I have my own Baptist arguments on the Catholic Church, but I don't particularly think that's useful at the moment in time. I'm more interested in kind of the cultural expressions of that. So, we could obviously get into those particular arguments and quips, and maybe someday we'll have some type of, open debate. I don't know, maybe Knowles and I'll sit down and we'll argue all of this stuff. Oh boy, gee willikers, won't that be fun? And then I'll turn around and I'll argue Biblicism versus Calvinism with Ali. I don't know. Who knows what the future may hold? But that's kind of my argument there to that particular question. So just kind of to level out that kind of a thing there. I figured that would be the best, the best way to kind of flatten that one out. From Crimson Thorn, why are the Republicans falling apart? They have no vision. They have no vision. So I will share a little something here with you that I think is kind of useful. Marco Rubio in 2016 ran an entire campaign on the new American century. That was his motto. And it was all of the things he thought the United States could do. Not like I love him, but this is a huge comms issue for him. My governor of Indiana, Governor Braun, who I appreciate. Whenever he gets up in front of people, he always just talks about letting everyone just do whatever. And there's an element of government in that I appreciate. But when you're the governor or when you're the president, you have a responsibility to cast a vision for the state instead of just saying, well, anybody can do whatever they want. And it's easy to do whatever you want, which again is useful. I don't find that particularly effective. Republicans have no vision. Where are they going? What are they going to do? What are the Americans going to accomplish? Again, the reason that Kennedy's speech on going to the moon, we chose to go to the moon not because it is easy, but because it is hard. And then a lot of people make excuses for JFK's, really rough personal life, is that he cast a vision where Americans could go. This is why originally in the campaign, Obama carried a lot of states that he would in no way, shape, or form carry in the second term. Although he was lying, he came out and said there were things America could do. Now, again, he was a big fat liar, but there were things he suggested that he could do. And I have said this before on the show, but for those of you who are just joining us, we're very glad that you're here. In the second Trump the second Trump announcement that he was going to run for president of the United States again in 2024, his first 30 minutes was a lot of grievance stuff, and then he shifted to talking about things that he thought the country could do. We could go to Mars. We could do a ton of excellent other things that we haven't even seen. Americans are a pioneering people. Manifest destiny. If America's not growing, moving, doing, building, creating, then we're stagnant, we're dying. The Republican Party has become the party of, well, as long as we just don't do anything, because the First Amendment says you can't do anything. If you choose a side, if you lean one way culturally, then that must mean that you're actually, that kind of crap, that's not useful. It's not useful. And that's also what's killing the Democrats in a lot of ways. And that's why you see a lot of their former moderate, by which I mean their corporate Democrats, that are playing such heavy overtures to the Bernie Sanders socialism cap. We must tear it all down and give me pudding. AOC gets up on stage and she has the booty, the Latina, the booty. She stands and everyone is like, wow, she's so hot. I must vote for AOC. I'm not joking. Those were comments made, I'm paraphrasing, of course, by Bernie Sanders, the hot lady package of AOC, what he threw forward at the American people. That's why you see Elizabeth Warren now touting it. The socialist wrapped up in a nice gift package kind of nonsense. It's really all they have left, but it is a vision. It is a direction in which to move, which is why it's appealing to a lot on the left. Americans really don't have that on the right. There's the populist crazy folk camp, which started out saying some kind of normal things, but when it was put into practice, it just got into the Looney Tune factory. And then on the other side of the right, you have the don't touch everything, take all of the restrictions away and just let it be. Well, that's okay on some parts of an economic scale, but if you're not going and doing, again, this is why Marco Rubio is popular. This is why the Trump administration, when he talks foreign policy and when he goes and fights on behalf of Americans, it's popular. That's that kind of a perspective. So this is also why, for the record here, regarding Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, why I say, he's kind of kept on too tight of a leash, in this instance, that I think that people are kind of treating him a little unfairly. He does try to go in the direction of the administration and then get the votes together to do that. Whereas you'll have individuals on some of these committees that are just kind of existing for the eternal re-election bid. That's not useful. Not a lot of that is useful. So, that side, this guy must be a male feminist. Well, if that's about me, I hate to break it to you, No, I'm not. I'm in no way, shape, or form a feminist, and as a conservative science teacher, I hate to break it to you, guys and gals are very, very much different. They're not the same. They can do all the same things. Probably not. I'm also not of the, women shouldn't serve in government ever routine either. I think that Margaret Thatcher was incredibly effective. Tulsi Gabbard was incredibly effective. Despite what you think about her after her time in the Bush administration, while she was in the Bush administration, Condi Rice was really effective. I just prefer like the stalwart kind of serious to the nose kind of political officials in the administration than I do kind of the loopy, goofy, silly nonsense. That's just me on that particular line. That's kind of my own personal take there. Well, I said, yeah, we get it. Republicans aren't together. Can we hear it another 400 times? Well, that was the question I was asked. It's the mail time segment. I answer the questions that are asked. That's that particular side of things. There is one last question that I do want to address. The Strait of Hormuz is not mined fake news. My dear Brian, they did effectively drop a couple of mines before they were shot. We have the evidence to suggest so. All of those boats were just blown up. And I believe the only 2 or 3 mines that they effectively tried to drop were then exploded. No, to the last question I wanted to answer, one question from the mail side over from Sharon. You say you like kind of the airplane pilot steady administration officials, but Mark Wayne Mullen is not airplane pilot steady and calm. He's challenged a Teamster Rep O'Brien to a fight during a Senate committee hearing in November 14th of 2023. Yes, I remember that. I think I cited that on the show. And my answer, I don't believe so far that I've endorsed Mullen as God's gift to the Secretary of Homeland Security role. I'm cautiously optimistic because it's a political choice. And I think that although there have been some people that have been, let's say, bombastic outside of the role, once you step in as an administrative position, yeah, maybe he will hold it together. I'm not going to say phenomenal choice, terrible choice until I see him, at least in the committee hearing. Let's see it. I want to see it in action. That's my personal take on that thing. So I think that's enough on the mail. Tony, who was replacing Marjorie Taylor Greene today was the special election. Oh, I actually I knew that special election was today. It was I believe it was kind of a packed special election. I'm not sure that I know quite yet on that one. The markets are saying that it's Clayton Fuller, who was Trump endorsed. That makes sense. Georgia's 14th, very, very crowded race. I don't know why my brain is telling me in kind of a red flag that I said Alabama. Georgia's is what I meant. If I said Alabama, that was absolutely not correct. It's a crowded race, I know, for that particular special election. I'm told that it's Clayton Fuller who's probably pulling it off. I'm not sure yet on that one, just in transparency. So, those things said and aside, it appears to be, in the primary, Clayton Fuller to run off, and then Sean Harris on the Democrat side to run off. Thanks, producer Daniel. That's the decision desk throwing that into us. Hey, one of those things are, I try to be as transparent with y'all and, let you know, hey, if it's one of those things, we try to make sure that we answer it as clearly as we can. So, that said and aside, hope that you guys have a phenomenal evening. We'll be back tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Y'all, take care.